Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to the panel discussion. Today, the panel will be talking about cross-application security risks and how to address those using strategies that really work. So we're delighted today to have Altum Strategy Group with us. So Matt Gantner and Dan Miller are joining us today, along with SafePaaS CEO Adil Khan. So if you have any questions throughout the session, then please feel free to put those in the chat box and send those across, and we'll try and get to those at the end of today's session. So without further ado, Dan, over to you.
All right, well, thanks, Emma. Appreciate the introduction. Before we begin with the agenda, I just wanted to say thank you to our attendees. We know time is getting short as we get to the end of the year. We appreciate you spending some time with us today. So from an agenda perspective, we'll begin by giving an overview of Altum Strategy Group and SafePaaS, talk through a use case, talk through some of the challenges within NetSuite, and then moving beyond. From there, we'll talk about how organizations can develop a risk-based approach to kind of help with these cross-application risks. Adil, if you'd like to kick it off with an introduction, please do.
Hey, Dan, thank you. And thanks again, everybody that made time for us today. As Dan said, we're coming to the end of the year, and this is our last in series of webinars that we do with our partners, such as Altum, around key areas. And I'm really excited today to talk about, the systems that are impacting our customers' businesses as they're moving to the cloud. And NetSuite is certainly, we've seen a lot in the last year or so. So I am the CEO of SafePaaS, and the company's mission is to help customers reduce risk using our technology and platform in their businesses. So as part of this digital transformation, SafePaaS is here to help you make sure that you mitigate risks. I've been in this industry for about 20 years. Prior to that, I was a CEO of a publicly listed company, so I had the opportunity to do a lot of financial audit reviews as Sarbanes-Oxley came into the market back in 2002, work with my auditors, Deloitte, and so forth. So that's my background. I've also written a book on this topic and have been on the Oracle user group, part of the GRC special interest group for a long time, and have helped many customers implement good controls in their companies. With that, I'll turn it over to Matt and Dan. Well, let me give you a look back, a couple of things on SafePaaS. So that's what we do. This is not about just a brief introduction, basically, about SafePaaS. So SafePaaS is here to help you, as I said, improve your controls in the enterprise by mitigating risk in your digital environment, whether it's the on-premise systems like Oracle E-Business Suite, where I spend a lot of time, PeopleSoft, et cetera, or some of the more modern systems that are on the cloud, like Cloud ERP from Oracle, Microsoft Dynamics, JD Edwards, which is on-premise, et cetera, NetSuite, which is talking today. And then on the left side, we work a lot with the IT SM systems like ServiceNow, or IDM systems like Okta, OneLogin, Azure, and SailPoint. So we kind of sit in the middle and help companies make sure that, as the data is accessed and transferred, passed along to different parties, as well as how it's processed, that it has all the controls in place in real time. These are all different products. If you have more interest, I think website gives a much better description and demos of what all of these do than I can do justice in the next few minutes. But in general, we help customers reduce risk by making sure they have a good foundation, audit risk and compliance. They have good access controls in place. They're monitoring their processes. They're preventing risk in those processes, and their management and leadership have insight into how to mitigate future risks. So that's in a nutshell is our value proposition. And DataProbe is our little tool that helps us do connection across many different systems like NetSuite, which is our focus today, but we connect into all major tier 1 ERP systems with the goal to cover 90% of the risk that exists in global information systems. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Matt, if you want to introduce yourselves and your firm.
Sure. Thanks, Adil. Appreciate it. Thanks for having us today. So again, my name is Matt Gantner. I'm the managing partner of a company called Altum Strategy Group. We really help companies optimize and begin to scale in the digital economy. Certainly, we've done a lot of work with NetSuite, with Oracle, and other cloud platforms out there. So excited to be here with you all, and happy to share some of our thought leadership as well as some of our collective success stories.
Great.
And thanks for that, Matt. Again, my name is Dan Miller. I'm a director with Altum Strategy Group, really supporting in a lot of the key areas that Matt just mentioned. But with that, we'll jump ahead to the next slide and give kind of an overview of Altum Strategy Group. So with Altum Strategy Group, we bring three kind of points of focus to our client partners. We bring deep end-to-end experience, a proven methodology, and a focus on partnership. With those three key areas, we offer services in kind of four major pillars. There's the project management and digital transformation, everything from software selection to project management and assistance with implementation, applications security, governance, risk, and compliance, working with applications like NetSuite, helping to deploy security and those types of technologies, and along with partnering with the SafePaaS team. Our third major pillars are digital asset management, everything from data governance and classification to master data management, data loss prevention or DLP, and then on into strategic reporting. And last but not least is our business process design, optimization, controls, integration, focusing on the process assistance, change management, business process controls, and then solution integration, and kind of integrating the other three pillars all together. Matt, would you like to add anything there?
No, that's a great overview. And if you'd like to learn more about us, please feel free to visit our website for additional details or reach out.
Okay. All right, so let's jump in. So we're all familiar with the NetSuite security model, with the employees, with the roles, permissions, and the different levels within NetSuite. And we've really, I think a lot of organizations have gotten really good with the day-to-day management of the security model. Here at Altum, we like to help organizations kind of move past that and really optimize the security model. And really what we do, the way we do that is using kind of three core principles. Least privilege, making sure that the business has enough to operate, but also kind of managing the day-to-day access using tools like SafePaaS Firefighter tool to really pull away some of that access that they may need on a emergency or what some organizations call a break glass type of a scenario. Use kind of a data-driven design, looking at the logs to make sure when a business user asks for access to a certain area within NetSuite, that they really do need that, and really the access really does model their true needs. And of course, putting a process in to evolve along with the business. And that really means when new functionality is introduced into the system, really making sure we have the change management processes, the strong risk management processes in place to support those. Adil, Matt, anything to add to there on the approach or the tool set that we can leverage to use that?
Yeah, so I from a product standpoint, we really appreciate Dan and Matt, you guys, being in there in the trenches with us and our customers, because what SafePaaS does is basically provide you a starter pack of some content, for example, for segregation of duties. It provides the analytics to be able to, again, through Data Probe, connect into and make a what we call a snapshot of your current security design and see how that benchmarks against some of the best practices that folks like Matt and Dan can bring to the table with you guys and their expertise based on other similar customers as well as your unique needs. So that's where I think we are really excited to have you guys kind of get more and more involved with our platform, because customers really see the benefit when they take our platform through a partner like yourself and then are able to quickly get that insight or discover those hidden risks perhaps, or compare themselves against the industry benchmarks very quickly. And since our goal is to help customers identify that hidden risk, we have enabled partners like yourselves to be able to do that in a day or so, right? So once you have the connection, you can get the results and that insight report very quickly, and then of course add your thought leadership to how that specific customer can benefit. So we're here to work with you guys and your customers to help identify that risk. In terms of technology, I do want to say a couple of things, and we'll cover that in more detail when we get into the case studies that we have put together for our NetSuite customers. So the technology that's very important to us is this is a different type of reporting than your typical BI reporting, right? This is looking for a needle in the haystack. So we start by, as I mentioned, some rules which specifically are risk driven. And we'll talk a little bit about Altum's methodology on how they take a risk-based approach a little later in the presentation. But I think that's really important to us because risk-based approach helps our customers pick out, based on their likelihood and impact in their organization. So if the procure to pay supply chain risks are higher based on your business model, you might want to start with that as an example. And so our tool will then go in and basically scan entire security configuration. So let's say you have 100 users in your NetSuite or whatever. It's going to go through all the permissions down at that level. It'll traverse through the entire security model, identify those users and those roles that are posing that risk, for example, of creating a supplier and paying a supplier. So that's where the technology comes in, but really the benefit comes in by having folks like Dan and Matt really interpret that for you and help you chart a course to reduce risk in your organization. So with that, anything else you want to add, Matt? I just wanted to emphasize the importance of having you on our team.
No, appreciate it, Adil. I think that really great context, and I'm good on this slide.
I think you hit on a great point with picking out the kind of the top risk as it applies to your organization, and that really feeds well into the next slide here. And we started to talk about risk management kind of beyond NetSuite. Again, the NetSuite role and security model is fairly robust. We're really seeing organizations who are managing the security model well is they're beginning to look outside of NetSuite. NetSuite provides a series of pretty robust APIs that, depending on different organizational needs, can go as far as bidirectional. In a lot of cases, it's really the unidirectional approach, but in some cases we do see the bidirectional approach. And of course, as we've discussed, those in-scope systems really are going to be driven by the regulatory requirements and business need, specifically whether or not you're public, private, or managed by or involved with venture capitalists. So one of the key things to remember at NetSuite is the robust API. There are connections to key HCM solutions like Bamboo and in some cases Workday, although Workday is becoming a more integrated system on its own. CRM systems like HubSpot, Salesforce, on payroll processing on the ADP side, but really we're starting to see more on the supply chain side with Coupa there. Adil, can you give us kind of a sense of kind of what you're seeing from your perspective?
Yeah, for me, this year has been pretty insightful. To put a positive spin on a terrible year for many folks that have been out there fighting this COVID pandemic. So one of the things that we have seen in terms of lessons learned this year is that our customers are demanding more digital, more things going digital. And we're seeing customers that were maybe running a ERP in their, on premise, they have decided they're going to move to something like a NetSuite or a Workday. And when they make that decision, they're thinking about making the entire business platform digital, because if you just, as we know, just move your general ledger onto NetSuite and put that in the cloud, that doesn't generally create the biggest efficiencies, right? It's really your operational processes, like your procure to pay process, how you acquire new customers and service them through Salesforce or HubSpot. How do you manage your employees, whether they're working from home or office or anywhere? So when they start thinking about this year, a number of customers have approached us and said, hey, we want really protect our business as we're going to this new digital transformation, independent of where we run the process. And as you can see in this example, that the process no longer is tucked away into one system like in the old monolithic ERP days of SAP and Oracle, where you could pretty much count on that technology behind the firewall. Now the employees are everywhere. The customers, you need to catch them everywhere that you can to serve them and to acquire them. And your suppliers are global, right? So that trend started many years ago, decades ago, but now it's accelerated this year, where the technology it needs to be able to service that. So with that movement towards digital, they also need a digital platform to really protect their business, whether it's financial statement risk, operational risk, customer service, better employee productivity, all of those objectives around your strategic goals moving forward next year. So SafePaaS sort of sits there, right? So we've been able to help our customers, that I'll again talk a couple of examples, where we can help them protect access risks, for example, whether it's in NetSuite or if it's a combination of NetSuite and Coupa or NetSuite and Salesforce. So I create my order in Salesforce, but I pay the supplier in NetSuite. That's now the risk is spread out. So it's no longer good enough to have a system that only prevents part of the risk, because that's basically an ineffective control. That's the definition of an ineffective control. So that's where I've kind of learned this year from our customers that have taken on this journey, whether they're just planning that journey or they have completed it and now they're coming to us and saying, okay, now that we have moved to this new world of digital, how do we prevent these risks from happening? And by the way, we still have those business risks. They're just fragmented across all these different cloud applications. So yeah, that's kind of where I would like to be able to offer some help and some examples of where our customers are moving. But I'd love to hear from you guys on what are some of the challenges you've had to face this year to help your customers get across.
Yeah, I think, Adil, you hit on a couple key themes as well that we've seen, right? Especially with all the disruption that's taken place, the types and variety of systems has in some cases grown, right? If we think back to, the March, April timeframe, a lot of customers that were working with us had to move their entire workforce to a remote model and have stayed as a remote model. But that initial kind of move to being remote, to your earlier point about trying to catch remote workforce and customers everywhere, that in some cases wreaked havoc because they didn't really have the overarching kind of set of microservices or platforms in place to allow their team to move to that remote model and continue to be effective, right? So ultimately they got there. It just took a little bit of pain, as I think we all have experienced throughout the course of the year, to really get to a point where that's sustainable for the longer term. The other kind of thing that's a key consideration as a result of that is that more organizations are really concerned about what does that mean from remote access to our proprietary data? And that could live in NetSuite, that could live in Salesforce, just picking on those two systems as examples. And how do I protect that and make sure I'm not losing that data through data loss? The home networks are not necessarily always secured to kind of standards. Those types of things are very top of mind. So I think as we have helped a large public company kind of go through the NetSuite journey, those two considerations have been key to allowing us to really look through the lens of people, process, and technology and understand those types of risks, and then enable the appropriate business or IT control, and then place those controls under monitoring to really make sure that we have, as tight of a control environment as possible in and around NetSuite. So yeah, I think the whole paradigm shift of how organizations are looking at application security risk has definitely shifted and really has forced people to take a hard look at where their data is, to your earlier point, but then also how do they secure that data in the longer term.
Absolutely. Okay, there's some good lessons learned there. Let's continue moving forward. Did you guys want to talk a little bit about your methodology on identifying risk? I think that'll be really helpful for folks to learn, from the experts like you.
Absolutely. So really, when we approach any engagement, especially around risk identification, we always want to take a pragmatic but holistic look of that organization. So we look at it through the lens of people. So how many people do you have? Adil, to your earlier comment around 100 users in NetSuite. Do you have 100 users in NetSuite? Is it 5,000 users in NetSuite? Again, depends on size and scope of the business. And then what are those users responsible for? And we really talk about that through the lens of what. So what can a user do? And where can the user do that, right? So that really bleeds into the process and understanding the business process and understanding where those risks are inherent within the business, but then also understanding where are those risks inherent in third parties, be it a cloud platform, be it a managed service provider, be it vendor, etc.
Right.
And then lastly, when you put people and process together, you're going to begin to understand where do those team members function, right? So in what technology platforms? So if they're in NetSuite, what activities take place in NetSuite in terms of inputs and outputs to the process versus what transactional activity exists within another technology platform, using Salesforce to our prior slide as example, what takes place there versus NetSuite. So once you kind of have an understanding of those three components, it's very clear, it becomes very clear in terms of what that potential risk exposure may look like for the organization. That risk framework we can then apply against a regulatory requirement. So let's say you need to comply with SOX or you need to comply with another regulatory requirement. It's very easy for us to then kind of bridge that gap between the understanding of the business and that corresponding regulatory requirement and really develop and or map in the corresponding separation of duties, SOD considerations, or other types of business process controls that are necessary to make sure that you're effectively managing and monitoring your environment on a go-forward basis. So that then leads to a really successful implementation because we've done the heavy lift of identifying all of the key inputs that need to go into a tool like SafePaaS. And then we're able to take that information and configure the application to really meet the needs of the business on a go-forward basis.
Excellent. Okay. So yeah, I mean, that's exactly what our customers are looking for because, you know, nobody has time to boil the ocean. They want to take that risk-based approach that you talked about in the beginning. In other words, you know, not all risks are equal. So I like the fact that you guys go through this assessment up front to really determine, you know, where do you begin and where's the low-hanging fruit, to use that overused term. So what are some of the challenges you've seen as processes have been disrupted this year? I mean, what are some of the lessons we can share with the folks that are listening to this webinar about, you know, what do you do to, because there's some new risk, obviously, we all know that we didn't predict. And so what can we do to make organizations more resilient as they move forward into 21?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think one of the key processes I would say that I think everyone probably felt to a certain degree is supply chain risk, right? So this year, as a result of how the pandemic has kind of moved around the world, it's impacted the supply chain at different times. In some cases, that prevented raw materials to be shipped to become a finished good, or it prevented finished goods to ultimately arrive at the consumer.
The market.
There's been a tremendous amount of disruption in that space. We've seen some people really have very resilient processes that have been able to respond to that very quickly within a matter of days or weeks. We've seen others that are you know, it took about 3-4 months to kind of right size that supply chain, and others are still kind of working through that, again, depending on the industry and depending on the products we're talking about there. I would say probably the next largest process that was largely disrupted, especially outside of what I'll call the kind of digital and technology focused companies, is sales, right? So we've seen major disruption in sales, especially in the retail space, where people are really relying upon storefronts and retail operations to bring that customer in and engage with that customer and allow them to tangibly feel the product they're buying. Unfortunately, with all of the precautions and guidelines that are in place, that hasn't happened. So a lot of that has shifted to a digital economy. In some cases, that has worked very well. In other cases, that's been a challenge, right? So a lot of companies have been rethinking what their e-commerce strategy is as they kind of have moved throughout the year, and especially as they're looking at 2021 and beyond in terms of what type of retail footprint is needed going forward, and what kind of e-commerce enhancements, optimization, or just even initial deployment may be needed.
Excellent point. So I think as organizations look for next year, I think the one lesson I'm learning from this this insight is that, you know, the risk assessment that you've been doing for the previous many years may not be the same. This year, more than ever, you will need to look at these new factors that are impacting your business, whether it's on the customer side, like you said, Matt, or on the supply chain side, or many other areas that we don't have time to cover. I think bringing in folks like yourself will help them benefit from the lessons that you guys bring to the table and move forward into 21 with a more resilient response to any potential risk or continued risk that we're seeing due to the pandemic and other factors related to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thanks for that insight. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also, you know, it's important to not only identify those and document those, but I think it's also important to have a tool in place that can enable the ongoing monitoring of that risk. And I think as customers look out there and say, hey, what do I need to do to enable this? You know, SafePaaS is definitely a very solid platform to enable that ongoing monitoring and management. So just kind of round that point out.
Sure.
And I'll just jump in just to talk about kind of, you know, firefighter as a way of mitigating some of those risks, and you know, taking away, being able to kind of ratchet back that access and move it to the firefighter tool and really use that. And I think one thing too that, you know, just dovetailing on Matt's points, like communication has really changed. We've all moved to kind of a more of a chat style.
Zoom world, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, a little more open, and I think you know, we've seen a lot more need for audit trails instead of, you know, talking over the cubicle wall to say, hey, what's going on with this, or what's kind of the trail. So I think just basic communication, and one of the things we've been successful with is just including that different communication cadence approach into kind of our process. And also, you know, firefighter is really a great tool to help with that and track and be able to get back.
Yeah, I mean, great point. We have seen the same, and I'll cover some of that in the case study. So let's keep moving. You guys are giving us some really good input to our visitor. I guess we're here at the case study that I've been talking about. So yeah, we're excited to report to the folks that we've had some really good success with NetSuite customers this year with partners like Altum, where, you know, this is an example of a multinational organization that is essentially global and has been around for a very long time. And there's no way they can run their entire enterprise on a single system, although you know, they have big system that their corporate offices in UK. But for the subsidiaries, many of them they operate like almost like startups, you know, which is NetSuite's favorite spot. I think a lot of startups use NetSuite from what I can tell. So yeah, so they operate. So we had the opportunity to work with them in a multiple different systems. So for example, they use Oracle, SAP, NetSuite, JD, Microsoft, all of these different systems. And what they were finding is that from a parent company perspective, a holding company perspective, which is the model they operate under, that they wanted to get some global, you know, enforcement of controls at the enterprise level without forcing their business units into another disruption of moving to a single platform, right? Because you have acquired some businesses, you have started up a few businesses, and you want those businesses to be able to do what they do best in terms of CPG goods and so forth that this company provides, consumer product goods. So they have a segment, for example, in healthcare and skincare and so forth. So they have some fantastic products that are very popular with the millennials and the folks that are buying those. And so they wanted to be able to leave them alone and run them and make sure they're well run and they have that capability to grow and scale. So they let organizations use different systems. They just wanted to have a global design, and they were challenged by that because, you know, the lingo of control design and audit and corporate audit was very different, and therefore being able to test the controls was becoming very fragmented for them and therefore very costly. And given this year's situation where you can't travel and you have restrictions on corporate travel and so forth, this organization was looking for a way to really meet their audit deadlines by automating a number of design and testing capabilities, by leveraging the investment they already had in the various ERP systems. Instead of moving to doing all that manual work, they were looking to move a lot of the testing into a system. So we were able to help them with that. The other thing, of course, was the number of their business units are in Europe. They're themselves based in UK, as well as in California, where they're dealing with consumers. So the GDPR, CCPA, SOX, all the above, they're impacted by that. So I thought this would be a more relevant to the topic today, because we're talking about complex problems that organizations are facing when it comes to managing their business in 20 and moving on to 21. So the way we were able to help them is by really starting at a very basic level, by just kind of looking at their current risks in few business units. We identified that they could possibly benefit by moving some of that testing online with SafePaaS. We did a basic integration, and that was just a couple of weeks of work where we're able to prove out to them where SafePaaS was able to handle risk not only in their cloud ERP or Oracle systems, but also in NetSuite and other areas. And with our data probe technology that has really come a long ways in the last year, we have opened up ETLs that can go across many different types of ways we can consume data, or as we call it, take snapshots of security models. So we can do REST services, we can do different types of SOA integrations, we can do SOAP, the older technology. We obviously do JDBC. We even can do spreadsheets that you can upload. So that gave them the comfort level that, look, with SafePaaS, we're going to be able to get to our controls from any data source. And that comfort level led them to kind of take on the project with us and replace a number of manual controls and limited audit capabilities they had in these quasi-startup sort of business units, with SafePaaS providing that guidance to the management. So not only just providing the evidence to the auditors in the corporate, but also the ability for management that is not really, it's a thin management layer in the business unit level. So they didn't have, for example, in some business units, even an internal audit department that was outsourced over to corporate. And so there's a cost structure, there's costing and all that they also, business units wanted to be burdened less with those kinds of costs. So by moving that down to the business unit and making management essentially review their own controls as part of a quarterly process, as well as just ongoing monitoring, they're able to cut down on their issues, which would generate a lot of remediation effort. And you have deadlines to meet while you're still trying to ship product out the door and retain customers and deal with your supply chain disruptions. So that was a big take for them, and they've really been able to lower the cost of ownership at the enterprise level. When you see from the parent company level, holding company level, they're able to reduce the cost of ownership of all these technologies because we're able to, with iAccess, for example, standardize on roles and security aspects that are so important today. The penalties are steep if you miss those kinds of issues, for example, customer data privacy and so forth. And they were, of course, able to also justify to their auditors, external auditors, ultimately that those access controls are timely and effective, and streamline their onboarding process. One of the things we've seen this year with this customer, others too, is that as your business is impacted, you're having to shift around, whether it's your suppliers or your staff in different areas, and the onboarding of access to different enterprise resources can be a big bottleneck and can get into the way of productivity. So they were able to accelerate that approval time by using iAccess and while maintaining controls on their system. So yeah, that's our big success story for this year, in middle of a pandemic where the customer wanted to really take advantage of technology and move to a digital platform for risk management, and SafePaaS was able to step up and help them. So, but a lot of this goes down to our customers and partners rolling up the sleeves. Folks like Matt and Dan and Altum Partners, kind of laying out that risk-based approach up front for them, so that the process of going from assessing the risk, understanding the roadmap for your controls, and then executing very quickly to get to that state, we're really able to offer this to the rest of the market as an example of a success story. So yeah, you guys have any questions or comments on this, or would you like to add some of your insight, Dan and Matt?
You're on mute, Matt.
Sorry, thanks, Emma. No, I was saying, so Adil, this is a really great case study, especially as we look out at 2021. A lot of the market indicators we're seeing for next year are showing that there's going to be a lot of potential IPOs coming up and a lot of M&A. So this type of scenario where you have kind of one holding company with a number of operating or portfolio companies, I think we're going to see more and more of that, especially in the private equity space and the venture capital space, who have historically kind of had one larger ERP at the ownership level, and have certainly leveraged like a NetSuite or a Microsoft Dynamics more at the operating company level. So I think this is a very practical use case of kind of what is going on today that will only accelerate as we move into next year and beyond.
Absolutely. So you brought up a good point about private equity and venture capital, and again, I had mentioned that earlier too. Is we do see that as well in our travels, that NetSuite seems to be more prevalent with. It's a trusted brand, if you will, with venture capitalists and private equities, because it provides all the reporting capabilities that are required to run a transparent operation that's required for investors. Even though these companies may not necessarily be public or maybe getting ready to go to public. So controls kind of go hand in hand with that. And it's not, this case study was more about access controls primarily, but as we think about it, there's another case study I'd like to share with you in an industry that's really disrupted. Everybody's seeing that sales are moving online, retailers are moving online. So this is another case study I thought would be relevant to the topic today, which is of a retailer as well as a manufacturer of performance footwear for men and women. That's a global footprint. Again, this organization is in 144 countries or something, and it's based out of US here on the West Coast. They have concept stores, they have factory outlets, they do a lot of their manufacturing internationally. So when we talk about supply chain and disruption, this is an example of unfortunate example of that. But the organization has done a great job of applying SafePaaS analytics and SafePaaS services with partners such as Altum to get control over their business this year. As you all know, that there's not that many stores open, or if they're open, they don't know when they're going to be closing. So e-commerce and this multi-channel, access to customer has become survival, for this industry, for the retail industry, and specifically in a cutthroat competition of footwear. There's lots of huge players in that market. So being able to stay competitive and grow your customer base and retain your earnings is really important. So that's an example of a customer that we worked with this year. And what they wanted us to do was kind of look at, was Matt, I think you were saying that about supply chain disruptions. So they wanted us to take a look at their supply chain disruption, but also as they were using new vendors and new ways of manufacturing and shipping the products around the globe, around all these constraints in place. They wanted to make sure that the new supply chain partners they were onboarding were within their risk profile of doing business, because we all know about the masks and PPPs, and that phenomena was not just limited to that medical supply chain. It has been happening throughout the supply chain of all major items, including components that go into footwear. So they wanted to make sure that as they were responding to this disruption in supply chain, that they were able to not only assess the risk, but also monitor, things like freight audits, and also on the customer side, they were opening up new channels to acquire customers. So compliance with their contracts and media audits, where they're using different types of media. There's much more emphasis on digital media this year, different types of digital media. It's not just Google Ads anymore. It's about new properties that have come online and being made available to e-commerce players, to being able to grow that e-commerce channel to compete with whether it's Amazon or whoever is your competitor. So they wanted to be able to make sure, as they were on the customer side opening up new tools to acquire those customers, that they were getting effective results to be able to maintain that cost of sales and cost of marketing. So we did a different type of analysis for them. This is more what we call our insight study. So the way insight works is that with that same technology we use to identify risk, for example, segregation of duty, which is our staple product and has been in the market for 10 plus years. Last few years we have developed technology to look at transactions in any data source. So these guys were able to provide us data sources into their merchandising systems, certainly we had access to their accounting system or ERP systems, as well as access to their, like I said, merchandising system, their contracts management systems, and so forth. So a combination of those systems was then applied using Data Probe and our what we call a MonitorPaaS platform technology that enabled us to provide some new insight and visibility around risks. So for example, they had some claims on accounts payable with new suppliers, and we wanted to, this is purely an example, I'm not sharing obviously their exact data, but their AP auditors wanted to be able to perform these kinds of supply chain audits as the supply chain was moving in real time. And so by using our technology and our insight, they're able to see, what type of claims we're having, where we're not getting the product as promised, or we're overbilled. A common example in this industry, many of the industries that use physical goods, is who is responsible for the freight, FOB, whether it's the buyer or the supplier, and a lot of times the contracts don't match the invoices. So being able to provide that quick analysis to their AP audit process, which was mostly manual and mostly, sample based, we were able to do 100% analysis very quickly in our cloud, which is scalable, and provide down to the claims ratio by region, right? So they have global footprint again, and so them being able to see, like in this example, in Middle East Africa, they're seeing the highest claims ratio. They will dig in and bring that in. And the examples that I have at the bottom is we're putting some preventive methods in. So you're seeing in Q2 to Q3 and 4 that Middle East Africa claims are now going down from 300,000 down to 100,000. And those are the types of technologies that are enabling our customers by monitoring, identifying alerts, and preventing that risk from recurring. So if you've had one shipment issue with a supplier from China or whatever, you're able to mitigate that risk by putting more preventive measures in how you receive those goods, how you pay them in terms of possibly invoice holes and so forth, where the disruption has occurred. So those methods really help them avoid that loss on the bottom line or leakage on the bottom line due to these factors that were impacting their supply chain. And then, of course, on the utilization side, their AP auditors could do more strategic work as opposed to, tick and tie, a three-way match. And then on the merchandising system, we're able to kind of see how price movements were happening, because with competing against Amazon and other major players, there were major price impact that was moving throughout. Also, this year has been unique in terms of COVID versus major holiday seasons. This is an example where their merchandising, cost is different in different parts of the country in the U.S. So that's more of a U.S. view. And then within U.S., you have net pricing that is impacting their sales. So now looking at more on the customer side, supply chain, the customer acquisition costs, pricing adjustments to acquire that customer, the discount strategy you're using. So all of these tools are really important to be able to continue to grow your top line while cutting cost on the bottom line. So this is an example of where they can now see where the merchandises are overstocked because of shipment issues and so forth. Where do they need to do discounting? And so in this example, for example, in net price in Northeast is the highest, and you're seeing in Mid-Atlantic, for example, in Northwest, it's more competitive environment. So being able to identify those discounts where you have overcapacity of inventory. Also pricing errors, on the graph at the bottom, you can see that pricing errors have caused some returns and defective goods and so forth, and you're able to respond to it quickly by having this information. So we're able to take data across their financial systems, such as the NetSuite ERP, their supply chain systems, and then from their customer management systems, retail systems, merchandising system, and put together this data using our insight capabilities that is available in SafePaaS to really help them manage that operational risk. We talk a lot about financial risk, but this year for this customer has been about operational risk, and we're part of that solution along with our partners and the customer staff. So that's a quick case study. Would you like, do you guys have any questions or comments, Dan and Matt, before we close this? I know we're running right on time. I think we're just a minute over.
Yeah, I think those were some really great slides, Adil. And I think, to put it, to help kind of sum it all up, I mean, I think from my perspective, it's really these kinds of analytics and these kind of audits really help organizations, stay out of the news for the wrong reasons. There's some places say there's no such thing as bad press, but I think in the industry we're in, I mean, there is. And
absolutely,
on some of these items, the reward is, business as usual, and that's really where organizations are trying to get to, is avoid the issues, and if there are issues, being able to manage the message and put the right spin and put the facts out all in one spot, rather than putting out a report to the street that gets interpreted one way or another. So I think these are all really critical components of a well-functioning organization.
Absolutely, yeah. This metric is so important, and since you guys, Matt, you talked about private equity and venture capital, I wanted to kind of give you this as an example that this is the type of metric that that might be helpful to some of your customers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so why don't we move on to the closing slides, and then we'll turn it back over to Emma for next steps. So how do we develop a risk-based approach? Now that we've seen some examples from our customers and talked a little bit about the approach on how to assess risk, I mean, how can our customers and partners develop that approach? If you guys want to take that.
Sure. So it's at Altum, we kind of see this in four key areas. It's assessing the system priority. ERPs obviously are usually the brains of most operations, really the centerpiece. Evaluating this integrations, looking at what data is moving, from your ERP, whether it's NetSuite or other, and moving back in, and how that all operates, getting back to that unidirectional or bidirectional process. And then evaluating the resources, and by resources we really mean what processes and what people are, how people are interacting between systems and intra-systems as well. And then quantifying the risks. Quantifying those risks are really going to help determine the outcomes and which systems kind of are assessed first and which audits are really necessary. Adil, I think you had something you wanted to say there.
No, I'm good. Please go on.
No, I was just going to say, really, these all kind of tie together to get organizations key metrics, and kind of some organizations are very surprised when they kind of put a number score on these, what areas kind of fall out and what systems really end up being the critical systems, so to speak, and the systems that are really higher risk. Again, getting back to that undiscovered risk concept.
Oh, I think that's great insight. And I mean, again, I'm being more of a technology guy. I guess what I would say is that, our goal in life is to make it easier for folks like yourselves to be able to do that at a very low barrier to entry, right? So we make our platform available to you. So there's, because we're in the cloud, you can literally connect, get data, run your analysis, produce your reports, and we hold you throughout that process, right? Hold your hand throughout the process needed. So we're here to help you be successful because I think customers need that leadership, and that, this is not the type of talent most customers have in-house that you bring to the table, right? So we're here to help you get that risk assessment done as quickly as possible, so there's a justification. And if it makes sense for them to have SafePaaS, that's great. But we're on a mission to help companies reduce risk, and you're a key part of that. So we appreciate you joining with us today to help explain the process and methodology that's producing great results for our customers.
Adil, appreciate you having us, and thank you to everyone that has attended.
Thank you. So Emma, if you want to kind of lay out the next test, see if there's any Q&A. I think I did some of the Q&A myself, so.
Yeah, if we have time for one quick question.
Okay.
Okay, so this person asks, it seems like a very complex process, and my team and I have been thinking that we may need to move beyond the ERP, but they're not sure if they have the bandwidth to do so. So any suggestions on how we can build the business case to start that?
Yeah, I think a good way to start to build that business case is kind of what we touched on, and what kind of Adil drove home there around understanding the financial risk and the operational risk, and then really tying that to priority, right? So what is kind of the core system beyond ERP that is impacting your business, be it revenue, be it sales, e-com, etc. Understand that first, prioritize that, and then determine, do you have efficient bandwidth or sufficient bandwidth on that technology team's side to really begin to understand what the people and process do within that platform. So it's a very pragmatic approach, but it's very driven by what is your risk tolerance, what is the criticality, if you will, of that system within your business operations, and then what financial impact could that have should something go wrong within that platform or within the connected system.
Sounds good. No, I was just going to add, I'd love to hear, Dan, your perspective too, but what I'd love to, what I hear there, just to sum it up from my perspective for our customers, is that, that if you guys can coach people, it is a complex process, I recognize that, and I deal with that complexity every day. But if you have good coach, someone that can come in with pre-developed templates and best practices and capabilities like running, some kind of an assessment using automated tools like SafePaaS provides its partners, you can get through that down to a very clean picture very quickly in a roadmap based on your priorities of business, like Matt said. So it may appear intimidating in the beginning, but there's a method to this madness, if you will. And I think the outcomes are really driven by the quality of folks and their experience and the technology, as we talked about. So yeah, that's certainly in line with what I see from our customers.
Yeah, and all great points. And I would really, add to that. Just make some assertions, put some dollar values on there, and stick with those, and kind of adjust as you go. And really, the best place to start is really just to start and to iterate as you go, and look at bringing in a partner. But if not, make some assumptions, make some assertions, document those, and learn as you go and adjust. That's one of the key processes, is just adjusting.
Good points. Okay. With that, Emma, do you want to help us close this session?
Yes, I'd just like to say a big thank you to everyone for attending today, and a huge thank you to Matt and Dan for joining us today. We hope the session has proved to be very valuable and that you can take away, you know, some considerations to think about in your own organization. So Dan, Matt, and Adil are available for one-on-one sessions. If you'd like to reach out to us, then please do. So with that, yeah, a big thank you to everybody and happy holidays, and we hope to see you again in 2021.
Yes, thank you and happy holidays.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Goodbye.